Can I make a game in C++ without using the internet? We programmers use Stack Overflow all the time, and now with ChatGPT, things have never been easier. But what if I remove all of them, and give myself only 2 days to make a game? Can I even open Windows? For this challenge, not only will I have to code the game, but with no internet, I will have to create my own assets for it, including music and sound. But if I fail this challenge, humanity is doomed, because it means the first time the internet dies, we will revert to the Stone Age. So I started off day 1 with setting up the project. For this, I copied some boilerplate code from this setup that I have saved on my computer, and I plan to use my own libraries, because I can't find answers about them on Stack Overflow anyway. Whereas if I'm using a library like raylib and get a weird bug, I'm basically stuck. So while I'm doing this setup, let me tell you what game I'm making. This is a card game I made with a friend when I was 12 years old. It's more or less Hearthstone in gameplay, but what I want to capture is the vibe. I want to make a 3D environment and capture that feeling of being a child and playing your own handmade game with a friend. So something very similar to Inscription. And the props for the game will be toys, like Lego weapons and items. Back to coding, I have some problems. I realized that my 3D library is not suited for this task, so I spent most of the morning copy-pasting some OpenGL boilerplate, like a camera implementation and a model loader from previous projects, and got to this point. And then, I added the ability to display a point in space at any position that will help me later when debugging. Things are looking good, and now I think I can slowly start making the game. First of all, I need a table where to play the game. Luckily, I have a lot of assets on my computer, so I searched for a table model and a wooden texture. I had to change it a little to better fit the wooden texture, but it looked kind of bad. Now, these were the only wooden textures I had on my computer, but I have a genius idea to fix them. Until then, I have to implement the camera moving, from looking at cards to looking at the board. The problem is that I'm not using quaternions for rotations, and that can lead to some pretty bad results. Fortunately, things went smooth, but just in case, if I get problems in the future, I can just bust one of these and read about quaternions here. Now, the next logical thing to do would be adding the playing cards. But I first made a repository to save my progress. And even though I can't push it on GitHub, I will be able to go back commits in time using the command line. Now for the art, you may not know this, but I'm actually decent at drawing, and also I'm not good at digital painting. So I will just draw the cards by hand. This is a perfect idea, because it will add to the vibe of handmade playing cards, making the game more immersive, and fitting the vibe of a card game made by kids back in a time when Fortnite wasn't a thing. Now my art supplies were kind of old, so are my skills, so I'm not sure how this will turn out once I load them on my PC. But I made some characters and some icons for attack, defense, cost and the elemental type. And looking through my old card game, some characters were super cool, so I could also add them directly without redrawing them. Now, to load this piece of paper on my computer, I actually have a scanner, but unfortunately, I don't have the drivers for it on my computer. I might have a solution for this, but first, that night I also worked on making the music for this game, and I'm using this thing. This is an OP1, and it's a music making device. Now you might be thinking, damn, this low-level game dev guy knows C++ and knows how to draw and also how to compose music? I don't know how to compose music. But I tried my best. I started from a simple drum beat to set the tone of the game, and then I chose some sounds that felt clean and chill, and I played some notes with them. The result is decent, you can hear it now actually, and it's not burning your ears hopefully. And for the sounds, since it's a card game, I just had to record some cards into my $200 microphone that somehow still makes my voice sound weird. But you probably don't have the time to record sounds like this, or the skill to make music yourself. I don't. So check out this cool deal from Ovani Sound. A ton of useful sound effects and a lot of music, from $1,800 to only $60, or you can select a smaller bundle for $30. And if you are not sure, you can look at each individual pack included and listen to the sounds it has. So check the link in the description if you are interested. But hurry, the offer expires in just a few days. Now, to load these drawings into my game, I will take out my old laptop, with the hope I have the drivers here for my scanner. Now, it took ages to load, and it looks like it started to decompose. But fortunately, I managed to scan what I need. Then I used the stick to transfer them onto my new laptop, and there I did some color tweaking to make the cards a little better. I also need a 3D card model to display the textures to, so I made a very simple model in Blockbench. Putting everything together is easy. Now, to render the character on the card, I will just set the depth test to less equals, and I can just simply render all the card layers one after another, like I would do in a 2D game, getting me to this point. Rendering text will be a little more difficult, but I have a plan. First though, I also need to prepare the music, and I will use DaVinci Resolve for that. This is usually used for video editing, but it has all the tools I need for music as well, so I'm just tweaking the frequencies a little and adding some effects. But with that, I think it's enough work for one day, and I'm super excited for day 2, because it's the last day. So rendering the playing cards is easy so far. I prepared multiple textures that I can just layer on top to make the final card. But for text it's a little more difficult. I would need to take the text rendering code from my 2D rendering library and add the ability to render it in 3D. Then I need to correctly calculate where to place it in 3D space, as if rendering text wasn't hard enough already. But I have a simple solution. I will just render the text into an empty texture the size of a card. Once I'm done rendering all the text elements to that texture, I can render the texture like any other 3D element. And with that, I can render anything I want onto my playing cards. The next task won't be that easy though, because I need to do raycasting. Raycasting is where you shoot an imaginary ray from the cursor position into the 3D world and see what object it hits so I can select it. Now, the math for this part is super annoying. Shooting a ray from the center of the camera and intersecting it with a box is annoying enough. Now I need to shoot a ray from the cursor position, adding even more complexity. But whenever I'm faced with a hard problem like this, I just ignore the fact that I don't know how to solve it and start working at it with the simplest thing I can think of. And that right now is determine where are the corners of a playing card in 3D space. This is not that hard. I can use the size of the card to determine where are the 4 corners of the card when it is standing in the default position at 0, 0, 0. Now, to move the card, I apply some matrix multiplication stuff. So why don't I just apply the same thing to these points? And sure enough, this gets me these points exactly where I need them to be. Now I just have to check if the cursor is inside this polygon or not. And after thinking about it, I realized that I am displaying the playing card on my screen using some more matrix multiplications. So I can just use that to also calculate where these 3D points will end up on my 2D screen. And with just a little more mess, I got 4 points on my 2D screen. From here, I will just make triangles out of it. And I have some triangle point intersection code somewhere on an old project. And if I intersect any of these triangles with the cursor, that means I intersect the card. And sure enough, I got raycasting working very well. Next I started working on the game board code to place cards down, and I like the vibe so far. I think the playing cards turned out interesting, and unlike any video game I have seen before. However, the table looks horrible, and I would also need a skybox. I have no internet to search for them, but I have a plan that cannot fail. I found a friend that does 3D modeling to ask if he can place a wooden texture or a table and a nice skybox with a house interior on a stick, and give me that stick physically. Because remember, he can't just send me that through the internet. And of course, his answer was no. So if you don't like how the game turns out, make sure you fully blame that on my friend in the comment section. Left alone with no help, I tweaked the colors of the wood and also the table. He actually did suggest me how to change the table a little, and also found a skybox on my computer. And now, things don't look that bad anymore. Next I started to work on the cards held in hand, and also spent a lot of time tweaking animations. The end result is not that impressive yet, but I think I like this project. So if you also like it and help me get to 500,000 views by sharing this video, I will do a part 2 and turn this into a working prototype. So share and subscribe to not miss that. But now this is the final result. There is no gameplay logic yet, but all the foundation is here. I can make any card type I want. And I made a very robust card animation system. I can tell cards to go wherever I need to, like I can place cards on the table, and I can draw cards, and it all looks very smooth. Here is that in third person. And if I hover my mouse over the board, or the playing cards, I can switch what I'm looking at. I can even inspect cards if I want. And I can even place a card down from my hand onto the table. So if this video inspired you to make games in C++, share it, and subscribe to this channel, because that's what I do here. And check out this video to also start your C++ game programming journey. See you!